Okay, well, we hope this works because I've got a new microphone and a whole bunch of little changes, which frankly, I don't know if it makes any blind bit of difference. But anyway, I've got a slightly different setup. I used to have this like cheap little microphone on top of the phone. I now have a slightly less cheap microphone at the bottom of the phone. So I don't know. We'll see if it makes a difference. I wanted to cover a couple of points. I briefly saw parts of one of Owen's streams about the flat Earth, or the Earth is not a globe. I mean, there are basically just three things that I really don't like about Owen. One is he called me British, and there's gonna have to be blood spilt over that. That's just wrong. Then there's the Earth is not a globe, the Moon is not a satellite thing. It's. But I'm pretty sure that if I spend some time with Owen, I'd be able to convince him of the reality of the globe Earth. With my huge telescope, I'd be able to show him that the moon moves, it's got mountains, all sorts of things. And then, of course, that unforgivable sin that, he licks his finger when he turns the page of his dictionary. That's just wrong. But anyway, aside from that, I really love the guy. So, but anyway, so he was going on about that, and then I saw a piece of a stream of Vox. I don't remember what the number was. 467, I think, was about the gammas, and 468 was about a what was it called? There was a play on words on one of the books that he's published. Something like an equation of almost infinite stupidity, and man, do I relate to what he was talking about there, because he was discussing the fact that the evolutionists don't understand the concept of why time makes it impossible for evolution to be real. Very similarly to the video I did on the fact that it doesn't matter how many billions of monkeys you have typing for however long, you just don't have enough time in the whole universe. They will never write Shakespeare. They will never write the works of Shakespeare. They can't even get a 50-character sentence, the beginning of The Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, without the comma. So you just have 50 characters, including spaces. You can't get that if you have a billion monkeys on every planet that we could possibly have in the entire known universe for the duration of the entire life of the whole universe. The chances are very, 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 almost infinitesimally small that you would ever get that sentence of 50 characters. So the entire works of Shakespeare, no. You would need trillions and trillions and trillions of lifetimes of the entire universe just to get those 50 characters. Now, if you don't understand that issue, that's just one issue. There are, dozens of other there are constants, universal constants, that if they were out by like the tiniest fraction, by like 1 to the power of 200, 1 to the power of minus 200, like the tiniest fraction, if they were out of whack by that infinitesimally small thing, the universe could not possibly support life. And, there's not one or two of these. They stack, and they don't stack linearly, they stack logarithmically. So, no. The universe did not get created by chance. It's the same as when I say, it's like you picking up a rock, throwing a rock at a mountain, and as a result of that rock hitting the mountain, you get a fully functional hyperspace spaceship built, complete with working computers inside. It's the same. It's about that level of nonsense. It's just not going to happen. And when you're dealing with people that, are talking about stuff like that, or where they haven't got a clue. Like Vox said something that made me laugh, because they said, one of the guys that was arguing against the mathematical proof, basically, which Vox did, that, evolution can't work, said, one guy said, oh, but time doesn't matter. And it's like, if you think that time doesn't matter in that thing, you don't understand the problem. You literally do not have the mental capacity to deal with the issue. But the thing that cracked me up was that another guy was arguing for not just that time didn't matter, but that he didn't believe in numbers. What is there to try and talk about with a guy like that? That's the equivalent of you saying, look, 2 plus 2 is 4, and the guy on the other side of the table who says, no, purple, purple. The fuck do you say to that? You know? And that level of stupidity is partly, in large part, why I'm pretty misanthropic. You know, I was 26 years old when I wrote The Face on Mars. And before that, I'd figured that out, you know, in my teens at school. Was like, I am surrounded by an ocean of complete morons. You know, I'm literally, you know, some of my teachers couldn't, you know, I was beyond them in some cases in their own subject. You know, by the time I was at tertiary education, it would be like university or, you know, higher national diploma, that sort of stuff. There were lecturers in our course that I was better at pretty much everything that they taught, including mathematics. I wasn't better than the maths teacher. The maths teacher was brilliant. He was a genius. That guy could teach math to chimpanzees. Honestly, he could teach math to like an amoeba. You know, he was genial. But you know, the fluid mechanics guy, you know, that guy couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag intellectually. And, you know, so I'd figured out long before the age of 26 that, you know, most people are idiots. And from my perspective, that's absolutely true. I mean, I even wrote, you know, I hated poetry when I was in high school because it made like very little sense. When the teachers tried to interpret it, they often interpreted it wrong. And, you know, I found this out. I proved it to myself enough times that I was like, yeah, I just, you know, whatever, I don't care. We had some teachers that would try and interpret various different poetry or even books in their own particular little fetishistic way, which had nothing to do with the intention of the author, which you could find out, you know, because sometimes these authors had written about it and so on. But I don't remember the poem who wrote it. It's something like water, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. And it was a very short poem about a guy that's lost at sea, you know, and he's got water all around him, but there isn't a drop to drink. And I said, like, I think the one that I'd made up was morons, morons, morons everywhere and not a brain to think, you know. It's pretty much how I felt. It's like, yes, I'm just surrounded by cretins, and I was age 16 at that time. So, you know, when you have a mind that can process things a lot quicker than the average person, and then because, you know, you can't relate to a lot of people a lot, you end up reading and discovering a lot more. I mean, keep in mind that essentially a PhD is basically reading something like 50 books about a subject. Essentially, that's a PhD. And, you know, I read works that were considered syllabus works for things like astronomy and whatever for fun. I read that for fun since I was age 16. So, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a PhD in astronomy, certainly, but I can keep up with like the concepts, you know. The maths, I have fallen behind a little bit because I just, although I've worked in construction engineering and so on, you know, I can do a lot of maths, but ask me to do calculus in sort of my head, I can't, you know. I would have to use a calculator, but give me a calculator and I can do a whole bunch of stuff, you know. So there isn't really a topic that interests me that I can't become, you know, fairly good at discussing or conversing or so on. And that, to a certain extent, tends to alienate you even more. You know, I've some guys I know that are really good guys, smart, intelligent people, but they will sometimes try and catch me out. They'll go like, one that happened quite recently was like, do you know what else affects your character and your personality? And I just sensed what they were going to say next. And I was like, yeah, the bacteria in your stomach. And it was like, oh, damn it. How do you know that? Why are you so well read? You know, they just got upset by the fact that they didn't know something that I didn't already know. But the thing is, it's not a point of pride for me. It's never been. It's just been a point of frustration, because even after I did the IQ tests and I figured out above 150, I scored 157 the first time, and I thought that can't be right. So I made sure that to try hard really on the second test, and I took a different test, the same scale, but there were different official tests. Don't ask me, I don't remember. I did this when I was in my 20s, and it didn't matter to me. It mattered to me just because I thought that the first test was wrong, and I thought, oh, this must be some weird, cheap ass fake test. It wasn't. It was an official test, but I just thought, nah, these guys must be bullshit. So I went to look for. It wasn't the Mensa AIM31. It was something else, but I can't remember what it was. So I did that one, and I scored 152 because I was really trying hard, And the first one I just kind of did it like, yeah, whatever. And the thing is, when you're trying harder to do something, you generally perform a little bit worse. So you average it out, I reckon it's probably around 155 or so. And when your IQ is in that area, you're less than about 1 in 10,000 people have got that level of IQ. So you do become pretty isolated. And when it comes to relationships, again, if you have an upbringing or just a general sense of things that you want to be fair, I never, even after I did the tests, I never considered myself particularly super intelligent. I just assumed everybody could do what I was doing. And the fact is they can't. And it becomes very frustrating because you're like, but why don't, look, can you just do that, and then you get this? And they were like, no, that's not right. And they're not trying to piss you off. They genuinely cannot see the steps you did. I had a brilliant chemistry teacher, and he was brilliant not because he was that good, but because he was a good teacher. His intent was to teach. And when you're working out I forgot what it's called now, molars and all that stuff. When you're trying to work out how much of a particular element there is in a substance or whatever, and you do these like molar equations. There's equations that you use to like to figure out how much of something there is in a substance after a reaction. And he was teaching us how to do it, and there were basically 7 mathematical steps to do it. And I was like, why on earth would you do that? You can do it in 3. And that's what I used to do. And he was like, he actually came to talk to me because I did it in like a couple of tests, and then he marked the tests and said, listen, I don't understand, like, I'm not sure if I should give you the marks here. And I was like, why? I got the right answer. And he's like, yeah, you got the right answer, but I don't understand the process you're doing to do it. And I'm like, but it's really simple. Look, I'll show you. It's, it's these 3 steps. It's that, and then you get a percentage. And he was like, but how do you know that works every time? And honestly, I was shocked. When he said that, I was like, what? Because it was clear to me that he couldn't follow the whole pattern of what I was doing, which to me was absolutely obvious. I was like, why did I do it in 7 steps? I genuinely thought, oh, it must be some silly English thing where you have to like tick all the boxes to get. I'm like, screw that shit. I'm just gonna do it the way that works. But it was obvious, to me, it was absolutely obvious that you can see the steps. It's like, it's not just. I was like, what do you mean you don't know if it works every time? It would be like, let me try and make an analogy that makes sense. Let's say you understand percentages, which I don't know if everybody watching this channel actually does, but it's the simplest thing I can think of. Let's say that you understand percentages and you say, well, 50% of something is like half, 25% of something is like a quarter. And the guy goes, well, but how do you know that? And you say, well, if you put, 50 divided by 100, 0.5. And if it's, 25 divided by 100, it's 0.25, so it's like a quarter. And when they say that, when you do that and you show them, it's like, well, look, but how do you know it works every time? It's like, what? Dude, it's converting a percentage to a decimal or to a fraction. It's like, it has to work every time because it's maths, you know. It's and that was genuinely that was my internal reaction. But I was like, what the hell? And this guy's my teacher. I was like, well, because it's maths, you know. I didn't even sort of like say it does work every time because, and to his credit, and this is why he was a good teacher, he looked at me and he goes, well, I can't follow what you're doing, but if you're sure that you get the right answer every time, that's fine. However, because I can't follow what you're doing, if you get the answer wrong, I'm going to give you 0 marks because I can't mark your working out. You know, if you do the steps the way I've told you, even if you get the answer wrong, but you get 3 of the steps right, at least you get 3 marks, you know. And I said, look, I'm certain about this. So I'd really prefer to do it my way and get 0 marks if I get it wrong. And he goes, okay, that's fine. I came first in that class. You know, I had the highest score in the whole class with the exams, the final exams. And I never studied for any of my exams. None. Literally none. For the French exam, I literally partied all night and went from the party to the exam, wrote it half-assed and walked out. And I passed. You know, well, not just, you know. But so the thing is, I'm not telling you guys all this to boast. There's a point to all this. What I'm telling you all this is that it's actually really frustrating. You know, it's frustrating. It's been frustrating in relationships. It's been frustrating in in intimate relationships, because there's also another sad effect of the IQ curve is that there are more men at both ends of the bell curve. So there are more, mentally handicapped, retarded people, whatever you want to call them, whatever the politically correct term is, that are men, but there are also more genius people that are men. And while, up to about like 120, 115, 120, there are a bit less women in that range. By the time that you get to like the 130 plus 140, 150, it's 1 to 10. So if there is 1 every 10,000 people with an IQ like mine, with women, it's 1 in 100,000, So I actually calculated once, there's about 10 million people in London, and I calculated and I was like, what are the chances that I find the perfect woman in London? There are 10 million people. Let's just make the maths easy. Let's say half of them are women, but then that includes every woman from the age of like 1 to 90 or whatever. Say, well, let's be generous. Let's half that again. And let's say that, there's 2.5 million women that have got the right age bracket within, a pretty wide margin. So that would be 2.5 million. And then let's say if they had to have an IQ like mine, once I figured this out, I actually did the calculation. I found it recently. I was cleaning up one of my boxes, and I found this little piece of paper, and I was like, what is this scribbling? I don't know if I can find it. Sorry if this is making a bunch of noise. No, I don't know where. I've got it somewhere in my desk, but I can't figure it out right now. So anyway, so it was like, okay, of this 2.5 million women, what, generally speaking, is the chances that I find a woman attractive? Let's say there's 2.5 million women of the right sort of bracket. I thought, well, generally speaking, it's pretty rare. I mean, if on average, the thing is, you only look at the ones that you kind of get attracted to a little bit. But on average, and I said, let's shoot for the top. Let's shoot for like kind of the best. And it's like, it's probably like 1 or 2. Let's be a bit harsh on this one because I'm pretty particular. Let's say like 1 in the average, 1 in 100. So, you've got like 2.5 million women, and if you only pick 1 out of 100 of those as being viable, let's say, you're down to what is it, 2.5 million. So you take off 2 zeros, it's 250. It's 25,000 women, right? So 25,000 women, and then I said, well, what if we also have to use the like IQ thing, And then it's like it blew the whole thing out the water. So I changed it to like, okay, let's say it's 1 in 10 women or something. Then it was 250,000. And then if they had to have the same sort of IQ as me, that's like 2.5 women or something. It was, I mean, it was a ridiculous exercise. I just did it for the fun of the maths or whatever. But at the same time, statistically speaking, there was some logic behind it, So from a certain perspective, you could look at that and sort of think, man, that's not good. And of course, real life doesn't quite work like that, but it's still an indicator. And the thing is, it used to frustrate me a lot throughout my life. Pretty much it's been a source of pain more than pleasure, really. The pleasure I've had from it is my own internal intellectual pleasure or personal pleasure for having figured something out, or having written The Face on Mars and having figured out stuff that, people that have been looking at this for years hadn't quite seen. The asteroid impacts, the way that Mars got destroyed and so on. And I made videos about this stuff, so you can look at the Simon Dan duel and whatever. And keep in mind, in a video there's no way I can match up all the details that I've put in the book. And even in the book, there's still going to be little bits and pieces that I've left out just because of space or whatever, Anyway, the point is, there is a way that you can survive even intense stupidity a lot better. And it's since I became Christian, I've been a lot more forgiving on the stupidity of people, because they can't help it. To a certain extent, I actually feel sorry for them, because I'm like, man, it's pretty hard for me to go through life being smart, but geez, I'd hate to go through life being really dumb. It's like you kind of get into these painful situations, you don't even know why. I get into painful situations and I do know why. It's like, I've been in plenty of painful situations, and it's like, well, it's because you were a curious idiot and you had a bit too much faith in, whatever. At that time I wasn't Christian, whatever. So I had faith in whatever, either myself, the universe, or some random genetic God I didn't really believe in, or people, or whatever. But it's like, ultimately it's the weakness of human beings that let me down most of the time. But as a Christian, it's sort of like, well, everybody has weaknesses. And then you also, when you do become a Christian the way that I became a Christian, the first thing that you see, in the road to Damascus moment, the first thing that Paul saw was like how wrong he was, how absolutely wrong he was about everything. And once you see that, it's hard to forget that, so it's like, wow. So I'm such a smart guy, I'm so clever, I got such a high IQ, I can figure shit out in like 1/10 of the time it takes everybody else to do it. And I was that wrong about everything. And that guy who's got like a 70 IQ and he goes to church every week, he was more right than I was. So, and that's what I mean, I've never felt ashamed of that or whatever, but that's why I never put too much stock in anything to do with my IQ. I mean, I know I'm smart and stuff, but I never really put much stock in it until I started to understand the issues that come from the IQ gap. And again, I've made a video on this. I think it's called Vox Day, Owen Benjamin and the IQ gap, something like that. But just because you've got a high IQ doesn't mean you can't be spectacularly wrong about shit. Like, for example, the moon not being a satellite and going around the Earth. Just to throw one out there at random. Hi, Owen. Or, just not understand the unhygienic and disgusting process of licking your finger to turn pages in dictionaries. I've got a 13-volume set here. What it would be like if I licked my finger to turn those pages. That would just be wrong. Wrong, wrong. You should stop that. So yeah, it's, and it's not just for IQ. The thing about being Christian is it's forgiving on a lot of stuff. Because if you're really a Christian, if you truly understand being Catholic, people say, oh, Catholic guilt. Nah. Guilt, many years ago, when I was going through my first emotion, no, my first divorce, sorry, not my first emotion, not that much psychopathic. I've had few emotions in my life. But when I was going through my first divorce, and I was on the phone with my brother, and I said, fuck, I feel guilty about not having been able to make my marriage work or stuff like that. And my brother on the other end of the phone goes like, nah, you pussy. Guilt is a useless emotion. And, I know that he was saying it partly just to raise my morale, but the thing is, it made me think. And I was like, you know what? He's kind of right. Because if you know you've done something wrong and you knew when you were doing it that it was wrong, then the guilt sort of has a reason for being and you should make amends. But if you're genuinely, doing what you thought was right or doing the best you could at the time with information you had, and things just spectacularly fucking flame out, well, how guilty are you? Maybe it was bad luck, maybe it was meant to be, who knows, And either way, beating yourself up about it isn't going to change shit. So, if you know that you did something wrong, then fucking fix what you can fix. If you can't fix it, again, make sure you learn your lesson. Make sure at least your guilt serves only as a limiter to making sure you never go down that fucking road again. But guilt per se is a useless emotion. And yet, Catholics are very aware that we are all broken sinners, That doesn't mean that you don't take your sword, your armor, and go off on a crusade when you need to. And, kill the enemy in droves when you have to. And again, I'm not advocating violence in general, just self-defense, just war, all that stuff. But the point is, don't let your brokenness weigh you down so that you become ineffective. You're broken and you're ineffective. Get better. Fix that shit. Work harder, whatever. But once you are aware of your own limitations, of your own faults, of your own weaknesses, of your own stupidity, it becomes a lot easier to forgive other people theirs. I wouldn't say it's fun necessarily, but I don't expect too much from people anymore, And it's interesting. I had an email exchange with Vox a while back. Can't remember what it was about. But I said something like, and Vox has said, I'm a very patient man. And he is. He is a very patient man. And I was like, man, I really don't know how you manage that shit. And he was like, he wrote back to me and he's like, man, I'm not patient because it's, constitutionally necessarily how I'm built. I'm patient because if I wasn't, I'd be a constant walking ball of rage. And I was like, oh, so that's how you deal with that shit, is it, Vox? I was more like, walk through life like, yeah, I'm not going to have rage. I got good reflexes, you just pissed me off, bang! It's like, it was sort of, I couldn't say that I've lived angrily. That's not accurate at all. I've always pretty much woken up happy, but, pardon me. But I certainly remember a lot of people saying, man, but you don't let anything go in terms of there's battles you could just avoid. And I'm like, nah, fuck that. And they were like, but don't you get tired of just whenever anything comes up that there's a confrontation, you're like, yeah, I'm in there. Don't you ever get tired? I was like, dude, no. I'd get tired if I didn't, because if I didn't, then I'd be carrying that shit. I'd be like, that guy just did an evil, wrong fucking thing. Then he still acted like he was right and he was wrong, and he did the wrong thing, and he hurt people and pissed me off and got in my way, and I just kept quiet because I was trying to be polite, and then he did it again, and that would bug me. If instead it's like, no, I'm gonna fucking slap you into a coma if you keep doing that shit, and you tell him to his face like, hey, have you finished now? Because otherwise you're going to have a fucking problem with my face on it, And they're like, you what? We're here now. Just you and me now. Yeah, maybe later I can spend 6 months in jail, but, you've really pissed me off now. You were very disrespectful to the lady that I'm with. So what's going to happen now? And the reality, of course, is that when shit like that happened, I didn't have a very long conversation. I just finished high school. I can't remember. I was like, I don't know, maybe 19, something like that, 20, something like that. I had this girlfriend, and we were walking somewhere, and she was Indian, so there's the whole Indian little tribe there that, made a comment while I was walking past, and I said, "Hey, what did you say?" And it's like, and who was it? Was you? Who the fuck was it? And there was like 10 guys there or something, 10, 12 guys. And they're like, "Oh, there's 10 of us. What are you gonna do?" I'm like, "I'm gonna fucking come a close second." And but I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who it was that said whatever. And I said, "You know what? Doesn't matter. I'll catch one of you guys one of these days when there's just like 2 or 3 of you, and then we'll talk." And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, I was going to the cinema. I'm walking into the cinema. I can't remember if I was walking in or walking out. Anyway, and these 4 guys like come up, and they're like, "Yeah, there he is. Yeah, what are you gonna do now?" I was like, "What am I gonna do? There's only 4 of you." I was like, "Fucking thank you." And one guy started to throw a punch, and it was like, I'm actually lucky that I missed with one punch, because I think I would have fucking injured that guy badly. So I did a kick. I punched the first guy in the face as hard as I could, and to his credit, it didn't go down, but I broke his cheekbone and I broke my hand on his face. So it was a pretty solid punch. He managed to stay standing, but I thought, they were all going to jump at the same time. There's 4 of them. That'd be the smart thing to do. So I punched him, kicked one other guy, and then I, without even looking, I did an hurricane, to assuming that this guy was coming. And if he had been coming, I would have hit him in the temple with the knuckle, and he just went zipped in front of his nose. I looked like, what? He's not coming. And I thought, oh, okay, let's carry on. And some other guy jumped in between and sort of said, no. And the guy that jumped in between was a well-known street fighter that was, bigger, stronger, more evil than all 5 of us put together. He had like some serious fights, like knife fights and shit. And he got in the way, and I was like, "Dude, just leave me alone. It's fine. There's 4 of them." And he goes, No. You just relax, man. Just don't, just calm down. Just sit down, And I was like, "Well, why? There's 4, And he was protecting them, really, because we knew each other from other stuff. And, and then I bumped into them, and a couple of weeks later, again, the same 4 guys. And I had a cast on my hand now, because I did break my hand. His face was like balloon for weeks. But and I thought, oh well, now they're really gonna go for it, because it was also in a dark area. There was no witnesses, no cameras. This is in Africa, like 30 years ago, whatever. So I gave my girlfriend the car keys, and I said, "Just go home." And she goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "No, just go home, because they're gonna come, and there's no way I'm walking away from this. I'm not running. I'm not, fuck that." So I went walking towards them with my broken hand, and I thought, this is gonna get ugly, but man, I'm fucking if I can't take all of them down, I'll take as many as I can. I went towards them, and they're like, and I said, "Yeah, so here we are now, boys," and they pretended not to see me, and they just scattered, they just disappeared, and it was like, the fuck, so yeah, but that's pretty much been my attitude in life. And then you do get wiser, and and also in Europe and stuff, you can't just have fist fights, otherwise you'll end up in jail and shit, whatever. So you tend to pick your battles a bit more. But the confrontation, that never went away. At work, at whatever, it's like, well, you want to argue whether it's a legal document, whether it's some contractual dispute, whether it's just an attitude, whether you're just trying to be a bit of an asshole and push certain things through. I don't shy away from any confrontation. It's just like, nah, fuck that. You just get wiser. There's some fights that really isn't worth having. But again, that's a little bit the constraints of the so-called first world. In the Wild West, like I said, I don't like the whole can't duel Catholic rule, because in the Wild West, I'd be like, cool, can do what I want, go where I want. I wouldn't molest anybody. I wouldn't start out being an asshole. But, if you got in my way and you were an asshole, well, high noon it would be. And living as a Christian is a lot easier, because it's like sometimes I see the stupidity, I see the dumbness, I see the confrontation, and it's like, yeah, it's not even a confrontation. What before would have looked to me like some kind of a confrontation would be like, now it's just like, oh, he doesn't get it. Oh, he thinks this, and that's why he's acting that way, and he's wrong about this, and he's also wrong about that. Wow, look at that. And it's quite interesting how very often, if you can see past that, and most of the reason I can see past that is because I'm Catholic now. To make another analogy, when I first moved to South Africa, I didn't have a gun yet because I didn't have the permanent residence, and you needed to get that before you could get a gun and a gun permit and all that. But, South Africa is a very violent place. There's confrontation all the time. Every weekend, there was like 2-3 guys dead from just road rage. Because guys have road rage and they get out, they start shooting each other. That was just kind of really the Wild West. There was 52 murders a week on average in Cape Town when I was living there. And I was like, fuck, I don't back down from things, so I was kind of a bit worried about it for a while. Then I got my permanent residence, I got my handgun, I got like security clearances, I was working as a bodyguard. But as soon as I had the gun on me, which I particularly lived with that gun on me, and I had more than one, but anyway, as soon as that was on me, I was like, yeah, cool. Even if somebody tried to give me shit, then it was just like, yeah, whatever, because now I don't necessarily have to have the confrontation, because, if you really piss me off, I'm going to shoot you dead. If you're going to draw a gun on me or whatever, I'll fucking kill you. And so I just let it go, because you've got a gun. I'm not going to fucking shoot a guy or get in an argument with a guy over some words, or over because he crossed the road in the wrong place and he beeped at me, or, I don't know. It's just dumb, so, but it's the same sort of thing, because if you're Christian, you know, like, hey, big picture things, who cares if that guy's upset or whatever, maybe he's had a bad day. So it's a lot more forgiving when you don't have Christianity as a backstop. It's like everything matters. Nothing matters and everything matters. Nothing matters because, well, if there's no God, it's just, at the end, we're all just food for worms. But while I'm here, fuck you, I'm not going to let you get away with some shit that disturbs me, I think one of the commenters, I made an analogy, like a joke, saying that, if you live in a world where you can shoot the waiter if he brings you the coffee a bit too cold or a bit too late, I'd be okay in a world like that, because I've got good reflexes and attention to detail. But, most people wouldn't like that sort of place, It'd be like feudal Japan on steroids. And yeah, it is. It's a brutal sort of, world. So Christianity is better. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought I'd share a little bit of the frustrations of, people think, oh, you got a high IQ, you're just an arrogant, boastful fucker, and you think you're smarter and better than everybody else. No, I'm objectively smarter than most people. That's a fact. I'm objectively quicker mentally than most people, but not always and not in everything. My wife's IQ is not as high as mine, but it is very high, particularly for a woman. And she is quicker than me in certain specific things, She has a great sense of humor. We both pretty quick on comebacks with each other, It's like, and taking the piss out of each other. We're both pretty quick with that. But, she's faster in certain things, and that's great. It's good. So it's not about being an arrogant asshole just because you have a high IQ or whatever. It's not about that. It's just, you can see stuff that other people don't see. And also communicate in this format. I don't have to deal with the idiots. I can just ban them, done. Don't have to try and talk to a guy who's like, the color purple, you're not taking the color purple into account when you're considering the flat earth. It's like, yeah, you're banned. Bye. It's like, don't have to deal with that shit. And my friends know me. I've got a lot of good friends. Most of them live quite far away now, but the people that I do hang out with, they know enough about me that they're okay with it. My supposed craziness is just as entertaining to them as their lack of knowledge about the pyramids on Mars is to me, or whatever, So I'm mentioning all this as final point. And again, just keep in mind, guys, sometimes I leave the final point at the end because persistence pays dividends. Persistence is one of the courage and persistence. If you've got those two things, you will achieve stuff in life. Even if you're dumb and all sorts of other things, but if you're brave and you're persistent, you will achieve things. Persistence is necessary. So sometimes I put the little final points at the end. And the final point was, there has been several people that have now made some pretty interesting comments on some of the videos that find some value in my discussion topics or whatever. So one of the things is, if you do happen to have IIQ, consider Christianity, because even with a high IQ, even before I became a Christian, I said, God is provable to about 80%. That's what I used to say. Because up to about 80% probability, you can actually prove the existence of an intelligence behind creation. The last 20%, though, is a pretty subjective experience. It's what I call subjective objective. You have to... It's an experience that unfortunately or fortunately is subjective. You can't prove it to other people. But it can be absolutely objective for you. You'll never be able to prove it to anybody else, but you yourself will know, no, this is objective. This is real. I didn't imagine this, If, I'll make you a silly, I'll make you an unlikely example. Let's say that you're walking along and an alien spaceship lands and gives you a signed copy of The Lord of the Rings with a little alien thumbprint next to it as their signature that they do right in front of you. And then they get back into the spaceship and they bugger off. And this all happened in, I don't know, a meadow somewhere with no witnesses. And you go back home and you've got this signed copy of, first edition of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings with a little alien thumbprint next to it. Now, you could tell that story to whoever you want. No one would believe you. There would be no way that you can prove that that little thumbprint next to it is an alien, that a spaceship landed, but you yourself would have the book. And you didn't have that before, so only a couple of things could be going on. Either you're completely fucking insane, you bought the book yourself and you lost your mind, and then you did all the rest and you imagined it, or aliens did land and gave you a signed copy of Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and put a little thumbprint next to it. So it's objective for you because if you're not crazy, you're not on medication, there's no other explanation. You've got the book, and when you go to the same spot in the field a month later, you can still see where the little tripod of the spaceship landed, which means fuck all to anybody else, but you remember exactly where it was compared to the nearest tree and so on. That's what I call a subjective objective experience. And in my opinion, even before I became a Christian, before I had my road to Damascus moment, you could prove God to 80% probability, but that last 20% for me was always like, well, you can never really prove that. So, what is the nature of this intelligence? Who knows? And you guys, you Christians, you crazy Catholics with your lack of condoms and your, married for life stuff. Oh, you crazy bastards. And here I am. So, it's interesting. It's an interesting life, and Christianity is a very interesting truth because it is true and so unexpected, like much of the truth. I mean, I get it. I get why people think that the earth is flat. Who the hell would imagine a glowing ball of fire hanging in the sky, and not one, but trillions of them? But, people that say like, if you just believe in the universe that they tell you, that astronomers tell you, well, it's so nihilistic. We're just these tiny guys on a little meaningless ball of rock that's in a meaningless galaxy surrounded by other trillions of meaningless suns. No, you moron. Just imagine how gigantic the universe is and how majestic God is. It's the opposite. Are you so narrow-minded, stupid, selfish, and self-absorbed that you think that it's all just about me? You're a fucking idiot narcissist. No. There's a whole vast, huge, massive creation with billions of trillions of stars all over the place. And who knows how many planets, and who knows how many other intelligent alien races. Why not? It makes it better, not worse. I certainly have never got a nihilistic sensation from the majesty of the Milky Way. If you've ever been in the Kalahari looking at shooting stars, looking up and you can see the Milky Way clear, dude, that is, you are looking at a part of God when you're looking at that stuff. And anybody that says otherwise is a fucking idiot who's probably never lived outside of a city, all right? Go in the middle of the desert at night and look at the stars and tell me that that is not amazing. And the fact that the light from the stars is started years before you're looking at it. It's incredible. It's amazing. It's incredible in the good sense, not incredible in I can't believe it because it is not true. No, I can't believe it. I can believe it because it's so majestic it would seem impossible. And yet it's there. So anyway, that was my little positive rant, I think, on the stupidity of humans around you and how being Christian makes it better. And remember, it's Catholic or get the fuck out. And the t-shirts are coming up with that. Crypto Fashion. As soon as they've got it up on their website, they're gonna ping me a message, and I'll let you guys know. And remember, I don't make a penny out of it. I've told them I'm not taking anything for it. One of the guys there had some pretty serious health problems, so I'm all for helping his business in any way I can get a bit better. They're a good bunch of guys. So when the t-shirts are out, I hope you immortals go out and buy one, or 10 or 50. Okay, that's it. Have a good night.